All right, guys, we have some breaking news from a special guest and our own Ryan Grimm, who has gotten his hands on some audio of Justice Alito talking candidly about his views of the country. Ryan, welcome. I know you're publishing this in conjunction with Rolling Stone. We're excited to have your breaking news here as well.
It's great to be here on a Monday.
Yeah.
All right, tell us what happened.
So Lauren Windsor, who Krystal I think is familiar with, Saagar you might not be as familiar with, she is a kind of Democratic activist and who does kind of James O'Keefe style undercover journalism as well. She's been doing it for more than 10 years, and this I think is maybe her kind of best get yet. She got 2 Supreme Court justices on audio. So last Monday, at the Supreme Court Historical Society was having its annual reception. She had actually spoken with Alito the year before at this reception, but didn't publish anything because he spoke like a justice normally does, either in public or in private. Justices are the most circumspect people in the country about their politics. This year, he threw caution to the wind. And what she got from him is rather striking. And it's also striking in contrast to what she got from John Roberts, who comes across as a very sane and normal justice. So actually, we could just roll the first Alito clip unless there's anything else you want to hear about.
Well, I was just going to, part of the context is there's been a lot of controversy around Alito lately. Flags that were hanging outside of his residences, his wife apparently getting into it with his neighbors. So there's been a lot of interest in Alito's politics and where he is exactly and how extreme he is on the political spectrum. So it's into that context that this audio drops. Let's go ahead.
Yeah, and the immunity case. The Democrats are pressuring him hard to recuse from the immunity case based on the upside down flag, the insurrectionary flags. And the other kind of, he's an insurrectionist.
All right, okay. That is what they are saying, the appeal to heaven flag, which is a whole other conversation.
All right.
These are boomer stories. I intentionally steer my way.
All right, so let's go ahead and get into this first portion of leaked audio of Alito. Let's take a listen.
And I'm sure you don't remember this at all, but what I had asked you about was about the polarization in this country. About like how do we repair that rift, and considering everything that's been going on in the past year, you know, as a Catholic and as someone who like really cherishes my faith, I don't know that we can negotiate with the left in the way that like needs to happen for the polarization to end. I think that it's a matter of like winning.
I think you're probably right. I mean, one side or the other is going to win. I don't know. I mean, there can be a way of working, a way of living together peacefully, but it's difficult, you know, because there are differences on fundamental things that really can't be compromised. Really can't be compromised. So it's not like we're going to split the difference.
So what did you make of the significance of those comments, Ryan?
If you hear it in contrast to how Roberts answers the question and how Alito from a year ago answers the question, it's kind of striking. What jumped out at me was taking the bait, and not just taking the bait, but like really swimming with it. That one side or the other is going to win. In some ways, she's baiting because it's like, no, I don't think we can compromise with the left. That's basically what she says to Roberts, and he's like, "What are you talking about?" Like,
really? Well, why don't we listen to that too, just to get a little bit.
So the next one is the remainder of the Alito conversation before she gets interrupted, which is also interesting, but a little less so. But actually, to some people, be more interesting.
Okay.
So
let's listen to that.
I think that the solution really is like winning the moral argument. Like, people in this country who believe in God have got to keep fighting for that, to return our country to a place of godliness.
Oh, I agree with you.
So I agree with you. We got to return our country to a place of godliness is what he's chiming in on there.
Yeah, and in general, I don't like to beat up on politicians or I guess Supreme Court justices for agreeing with people that like approach them in the line
you have
at the
no
post
idea.
office.
Yeah.
But I think when it's combined with what he said earlier, like she's really ramping it up there where she's like, I think we need to fight to return this country to a place of godliness. Like a Supreme Court justice who's worried about appearing neutral before the entire country would be like, that's not really a role for the Supreme Court to return the country to a place of godliness. He's like, I agree with you.
But I'm not sure that's what he's saying. I mean, I guess my only pushback is, what do you think Sotomayor or Kagan is going to say, or Ketanji Brown Jackson? Like, if I go up to them at a liberal event and be like, ma'am, this is terrible. Like, one side's going to win. I mean, in a certain sense, like, it's not wrong.
Well, this gets to, we actually know what John Roberts said when he was asked a very similar question. This is the third shot that we have. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
It's a very tumultuous time in the country, and I'm just curious, like, from your perspective on the court, like, how do we start to repair the polarization?
Well, I mean, the first thing I think is to tell me when the non-tumultuous time has been here. I mean, you look at the court, what the court was doing in the 60s, what the court was doing during the New Deal, what the court was doing, after Dred Scott and all this. It's kind of a regular thing. People think it's so different and special. It's been pretty tumultuous for a long time.
So you think this is a normal period?
I don't know if it's normal. I mean, since I've been here almost 20 years, there have been quieter times. But the idea that the court is in the middle of a lot of tumultuous stuff going on, that's nothing new.
I guess I wouldn't say that it's not like it's an innovative thing. It's not new. I guess I really feel like we're at a point in our country where the polarization is so extreme that it might be irreparable.
Oh, I don't think that.
I think
it's extreme is like the Civil War. We did that during Vietnam. People were getting killed, and I was there in Vietnam. This is all right. I mean, it's not all right, but it's not like it's as dramatically different. It's a common thing. People with their own perspective think this is so extraordinary. I don't know.
But you don't think there's like a role for the court in like guiding us toward a more moral path?
No, I think the role for the court is deciding the cases. If I start, would you want me to be in charge of guiding us toward a more moral path? That's for the people we elect. That's not for lawyers.
Well, I guess I believe that the founders who are godly, like we're Christians, and I think that we live in a Christian nation, and that our Supreme Court should be guiding us in that path.
Yeah, I don't know that we live in a Christian nation. I know a lot of Jewish and Muslim friends who would say maybe not. And it's not our job to do that. It's our job to decide the cases as best we can.
The Alito comments really do, in contrast, it's quite notable. A very different tone. And she's really trying with them. She's like, but what about this?
Don't you think we live in a Christian nation?
He's like, nope.
Saagar, how do you think people are going to respond to that?
I was going to say, I think he's going to have some problems on that one.
On the right. I'm on the right on that one.
A lot of...
It's like, wait a minute, no, we are a Christian nation.
If I recall, Alito is Catholic, yes? He's like a conservative Catholic. Yeah. That checks out. I think in terms of some of his comments. I don't know. I'm actually, I see that as a story. On the right, in terms of how Roberts talks. That is very much how a lot of people caricature him in terms of his impact. I guess I'm just a little bit skeptical that Ketanji Brown Jackson, Elena Kagan, and Sotomayor don't believe the exact same thing. And in a certain sense, they're not wrong. Like,
which thing do they believe?
Oh, in terms of like one side has to win on specific issues. I mean, if we look on the issue of abortion, I think it's quite literally true that one side has to win. I think one side will win, through the democracy or immigration. I mean, it is a certain point. Like there are zero-sum questions about levels or different issues. So to me, I guess it's not as controversial in terms of how it's already been expressed through jurisprudence, if that makes sense. As we've already seen in terms of the way he writes his opinions and others, it basically comports with a partisan view of the court, which I don't think is all that out of step with either of Alito, the way that both sides are acting.
Alito's the upside-down flag flyer that we knew he was.
Well, his wife is the upside-down flag.
He knew nothing about it. He just couldn't control his crazy wife.
But I mean, to be honest though, that's my red flag. I'm like, dude, you can't tell your wife not to put your fucking upside-down flag outside her house. Like, what's going on here?
And you don't have to order her. You just say, look, please, man.
You'll be like, ma'am,
I'm on the Supreme Court.
I'm on the Supreme Court. Like, we don't act like this and get into boomer beefs with our neighbors.
Reminds me of when Mitt Romney had some unauthorized workers on some project he was doing. He said, for Pete's sake, man, I'm running for president.
Did he say that? Yes. See, I like that. Yeah, I support that.
I mean, I guess to your reaction, Saagar, like there is a sense at this point, it's just sort of like mainstream accepted that these are partisan actors.
Right.
who are towing the line for an ideological movement.
Right.
And Alito and Thomas are definitely, on the right at the edge of pushing that and pushing in that direction. But I mean, it would have been very recent that view of the court would be anathema. I mean, they're supposed to be calling balls and strikes, and they still publicly, typically portray themselves that way of like, I'm not an ideological actor. I'm here just looking at the case law, looking at the original text and going back to what the founders said and what I'm just interpreting, I'm the expert interpreting what was laid down before. And so when he positions himself as, no, I'm on one side and my side has to win. Now that may not be dissonant from how we all view the court at this point, but it is very dissonant from what the institution was supposed to be, what they still, portray themselves as ultimately being.
Yeah, and in fact, not that long ago, applies to Alito too. Just a year ago, we have a little clip of her conversation in 2023 at this same event 1 year earlier, which we can play here, and you can see the contrast in the two Alitos, which I think is reflective of what he's gone through too over the last year.
Okay. So he's been sort of radicalized over this past year, is what comes on here.
Or at least more willing to just
let it all hang out. All right, let's take a listen to that.
How do we get America back to a place of really less polarization? Because I feel like the court is undergoing this period of turmoil. Like people don't trust in, I think, just this is like the last bastion of, I think, public trust. And how do we get back to that?
I wish I knew. I don't know. It's easy to blame the media, but I do blame them because they do nothing but criticize us. And so they have really eroded trust in the court. I don't know. I really don't know.
So he's much more measured there.
And then he goes on to say, ordinary people's not the right word, but everyday people need to work to overcome the polarization so we can bring our country back together again. The kind of platitudes that the nation has expected to come.
Platitudes,
It's what we expect from Supreme Court justices. Platitudes.
My real takeaway is I'm like, dude, you don't have more composure around some random lady who you.
That's the other thing.
That'd be my. I mean, even where we are, there are weird people who come up to us and you're like, yeah, I'll see you. I gotta go to the bathroom. I'll see you later.
This is a stranger.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they met 1 year earlier.
That actually is a little bit shocking. Is really just even engaging and talking with somebody who you have no idea who they are. And you should always remember, mics are always hot. So there you go.
Yeah.
Ryan, last question for you. How has Justice Alito responded to the recent criticisms of him? And do you expect this to put more pressure on him with regards to his conduct?
Yeah, I think this will be MSNBC and CNN will have a field day with it, and it'll put more pressure on him. But there's only so much pressure you can put on a lifetime appointee.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Who have no ethical code of conduct.
Did you reach out to SCOTUS for comment?
We haven't heard back yet.
Okay. Interesting.
But
I'm curious to see how the SCOTUS watchers think.
They are going to freak out, I think,
so?
because I think this is a new level, to have basically somebody surreptitiously recording a Supreme Court justice. And we're going to talk to Lauren later today.
Okay.
And she'll be in this segment. Stick around. We'll edit these conversations together.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So Ryan, congratulations on some very interesting reporting. And we are going to now show you that interview between Ryan and Lauren.
And so we are joined next by Lauren Windsor, who's going to give us her perspective on how this evening unfolded. Lauren is executive producer over at The Undercurrent. You can find her at LA Windsor on Twitter. The Undercurrent is a project of American Family Voices. Lauren, thanks for joining us here.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
And you're also making a documentary called Gonzo for Democracy, which we can expect to see in the fall. Is that right?
About September.
And this is work that is fueling that documentary. Am I right?
It is, yes.
Okay, so last Monday evening, it's the Supreme Court Historical Society annual event. This was your second time?
Yes.
Going. So how did you get in? Tell people because people are going to wonder, did she sneak in through a window, or how does it work that you just find yourself kind of clinking glasses with Supreme Court, not just one, but two Supreme Court justices in an evening?
Well, I became a member of the Supreme Court Historical Society after hearing about the reporting from ProPublica with Clarence Thomas. He was known to frequent the events, and I bought a ticket to the dinner.
And that's all there is to it.
That's it.
And so you bought a ticket under your own name, you entered under your own name, you introduced yourself, as we heard in the audio, as Lauren. Mm-hmm. So the only subterfuge that I could tell was you were doing a little bit of a put on about your own politics.
I mean, it was definitely a put on about my own politics.
So you are not somebody who believes we should be fighting to return the country to godliness.
I mean, my religious beliefs aside, should we have a greater morality? Sure. But in the sense of restoring, I shouldn't say restoring, leading us to a Christian theocracy is not, I think, what the founders intended.
Fair enough. All right. So you spoke with Alito a year ago. So what was your thinking going into the second conversation? Like, how are Supreme Court justices are the hardest people to get to open up in the world? Like, we've all seen the confirmation hearings. Senators, who are many of them are lawyers who are very adept at cross-examining people, they can't even get from a justice a hint of how they're going to rule on, say, Roe v. Wade. Like Alito, like if you only went by his confirmation hearing, you wouldn't even know, how he felt on the issue of abortion. So how did you think about how to go in and get him to kind of open up and get something newsworthy out of him?
Well, I knew that it couldn't be addressing anything about a matter before the court. And I knew that if I framed it in Republican versus Democrat terms or Joe Biden versus Donald Trump terms, that he would have likely shut down. And there's guidance within the, when you get the tickets, if you broach a topic with a justice that has anything to do with a matter before the Supreme Court, it's grounds for being escorted from the premises.
Oh, wow.
So the first year that I went, I very much was tiptoeing. And I say that, and I did ask him about the Dobbs decision, which at the time was, really, they were pursuing the Dobbs leaker, and everyone assumed that it was Justice Alito. So I wanted to gauge his reaction as to,
Right. Had the decision come out yet?
Yeah, it had.
Last year? Uh-huh. Oh, duh, of course it had. It was 2 years earlier.
Yeah.
They were still, but they were still looking for the leaker.
Yes,
at that point. Right. Okay. So I guess he could say, well, it's not an issue before the court anymore.
Right. I didn't think that it was at that time. And I think there is some amount of, I don't know that I want to say bluffing. They just, assume that if they put that prohibition out there, people will respect it. And I think it's stated but not followed. But you obviously really have to sort of test boundaries and see, and that's an evolving situation. As the conversation's unfolding, where can I gain a little ground here or there? And if they're not responding to something, do I turn the conversation in a different direction?
And walk us through what you're thinking as he's answering your first question. And I guess it makes sense now. So you mentioned the left and you mentioned polarization because that's a way to hint at the political warfare underway without talking about Trump, Biden, Democrats, Republicans. Is that right?
Yeah, it's implied in the polarization itself. I mean, it's...
Right.
And you can talk about it.
But it's not triggering them to shut down.
Yeah, and it's more of, pardon me, how are we going to fix this problem in our society? It's broader and less like, what are you going to do to fix it? Yeah, I did go further with Justice Roberts this year when I asked him, about the Supreme Court should have a role in leading us to a more moral place. And that was still within the realm of acceptable, but it was also at the end of the dinner. After the dinner was over, we didn't have a terribly long conversation, and he wasn't terribly forthcoming, but I mean, forthcoming enough.
And so respond to people who are going to say, look, she's leading Alito on here. Like, this is unfair because he's sort of being entrapped into these answers that he ends up giving. What would you say to that? Well,
so he could have answered the way that Justice Roberts answered, which was to say, we don't have a role. That's not our role. You shouldn't expect that from lawyers. That's for our elected officials.
he could have even given his own answer from 2023, from just a year prior, and said, I don't know. I don't know that we have a role in that.
Right. Yeah, and in 2023, he said maybe regular people, that's a job for regular people, ordinary people to kind of come together, which is a much more reasonable thing for a Supreme Court justice to say.
Yes, and I think when you look at the exchange, it wasn't just, I think you're probably right when I said, I don't think there's any negotiation with the left. It's just about winning, which to me, for him to say, I think you're right, is problematic. But to go further and then to say, there's just some areas where you can't compromise, it's showing that he does not have impartiality in the matters before the court. And that's a real problem when, impartiality is a bedrock principle to our democracy.
Yeah, and I thought that was interesting too, the way he went forward, because to me, when say like James O'Keefe, for instance, like leads somebody on and gets them to say, and then they get fired for saying to something crazy. I've always felt sympathy for those types of people, because if somebody comes up to me in line at the post office and they're like saying something crazy, I'm just trying to mind my own business. Yeah, sure, whatever. Like it's easier to just not have conflict. But he didn't just say He then got worked up and started giving his own analysis of it. So then I'm curious how you decided to take it from there, and in general, how you decide when to talk. This is something I think about as an interviewer, and sometimes I err on the side of talking too much. Like, when do you jump in? Because what you have to say isn't newsworthy. What he has to say is. So how do you balance like trying to move the conversation forward while still giving him enough rope and room to kind of hang himself?
It's really an art and not a science. You're in the middle of talking with someone, and it's a constant gauge of what feels like there's, forward motion in the conversation. And sometimes I think my willingness to be passionate in a situation and be aggressive in a situation can be helpful. With some people, it would shut them down, and they would be like, it's nice to meet you, I can't talk about this, or this is, they would move on and in some way dodge whatever it is that I'm asking. But in this particular case, my sense was that he was very aggrieved. And he may very well have held the same views in 2023 and just had a better time hiding those, in conversation. And then with the course of the last year, all the events that have unfolded with him being at the, center, under this brutal spotlight, it may have inflamed him more. I mean, I can't say whether or not he had the same views then as now, but he obviously had some kind of evolution in his willingness to talk about it.
So the context here is important. There's the immunity case before the Supreme Court. How do you think that this will play into the politics around that, with Democrats trying to get him to recuse? He's been dug in so far.
Well, so Justice Alito is 74, I believe. And, I would imagine that he's thinking about retirement. And I think that if he's stated his willingness to be firm in his opposition with the left on fundamental things, that he might do what he can to aid Trump in being reelected, for ideological reasons, but purely personal ones.
Right.
You
might want an out.
Yeah.
So what's your sense of the fallout here?
I imagine that it will be pretty big. I try to not overhype the news that I break because I like for it to speak for itself. When you overhype something, oversell something, you know, people really, the audience becomes very jaded, and I've seen that happen with this. And so for me, I tried to, I think it's the biggest story of my career. I've had multiple people tell me that. We'll see how it hits. But I think there will be a lot of people who run with the story.
Yeah, I think it is. Like that's my read on it too. I guess we'll see. Final question in response to the predicted critics. I bet some critics on the right are going to say, basically, how dare you? Like the Supreme Court is this bastion of public trust, and going in and recording a Supreme Court justice undermines that public trust, and that we as a public have a responsibility to uphold the Supreme Court. What would you say to them?
Well, to all the pearl clutchers out there, let's talk about decorum with the court. Let's talk about the public trust, because I think anyone would look at the gifts that Justice Thomas took and did not disclose, gifts they would consider extraordinary. It boggles the mind how anyone can rationalize buying an RV for someone, paying for someone's child's tuition, paying for someone's mother's house. You know, trips are one thing. You know, if it were trips alone, it wouldn't be the story that it is. But we're talking about something far, far greater than that, and deeply corrupt.
Well, Lauren, congratulations on the scoop. People can find her stuff. L.A. Windsor is her Twitter handle. American Family Voices is the organization where she works. Undercurrent is a project of American Family Voices. And the documentary coming is called Gonzo for Democracy.
Yes, Gonzo for Democracy. Looking
forward to that. Is there going to be a lot more of this kind of thing in there?
We are looking to publish a number of stories with the documentary that are scoops, so unpublished material in the documentary, so that people have a very motivating factor in watching it. So
I have not seen the last of Lauren, that's for sure. All right, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Ryan.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.